Australia's historic qualification for the 1974 FIFA World Cup marked a pivotal moment for Oceanian football. As the first team from the region to reach the world stage, Australia ignited hope for the sport's future across the Pacific, setting a benchmark for excellence in the area. Following Australia's breakthrough, New Zealand also emerged as a dominant force, with both nations shaping the early narrative of Oceanian football. Despite these early successes, the path that followed has been challenging. Oceanian teams have only made a handful of World Cup appearances, underscoring the challenges posed by geographic isolation, limited resources, and fierce international competition. Now, a groundbreaking development promises to reshape this landscape. The OFC Professional League, set to launch in 2026, aims to bridge the gap between Oceania and the rest of the footballing world. By providing regular, high-quality competition, the league is expected to nurture local talent and create a sustainable professional environment. What could this mean for the region's football future? Join us as we now explore how this landmark initiative could potentially produce the next generation of World Cup stars and transform Oceanian football on both the club and national team levels. Football's journey in Oceania began in the late 19th century. Introduced by European colonisers, not only to the scattered island nations of the Pacific, but also to larger territories like Australia and New Zealand. In these early days, football communities emerged in diverse settings, from Australia's well-established sporting culture to the developing passion scene in New Zealand and Fiji. The vast stretches of ocean that separate these countries created a unique challenge. While Australia and New Zealand were quick to embrace and institutionalise the sport, with Australia building a robust football culture and New Zealand rapidly catching up, the isolated nature of many island nations meant that establishing regular competitive fixtures and nurturing talent was often difficult. Limited resources, sparse infrastructure, and the dominance of other sports, notably rugby, further complicated football's growth across the region. In Australia and New Zealand, the early formation of national associations laid the groundwork for organised competitions and international ventures. Australia's early successes would eventually set a precedent for the region, culminating in their historic qualification for the 1974 FIFA World Cup, the first for any Oceanian nation, while New Zealand also rose to prominence, together establishing a dual legacy of footballing excellence in Oceania. Despite these advances, many smaller nations grappled with logistical challenges. In countries where proper pitches, coaching facilities, and basic equipment were scarce, football development was often a grassroots endeavour, driven by passion rather than institutional support. Nonetheless, the early establishment of football in Australia and New Zealand provided a beacon of hope and a model that other nations in Oceania aspired to follow. As the decades passed, the foundations laid during these formative years would later underpin efforts to overcome isolation, promote regional tournaments, and eventually form the Oceania Football Confederation in 1966. A crucial step towards uniting the disparate football communities across the Pacific. As the new millennium dawned, Oceanian football found itself at a pivotal crossroads, balancing historic achievements with the need to establish a more competitive and sustainable future. The early foundations laid by Australia and New Zealand, with Australia's 1974 World Cup qualification and the dual dominance of both nations enjoyed, had brought regional attention. However, the path to enduring international recognition continued to be filled with obstacles. The establishment of the Oceania Football Confederation had been a significant milestone. Over the years, the OFC Nations Cup, initiated in 1973, provided a crucial platform for national teams to gain exposure on the international stage. Australia's early leadership in football not only set high standards, but also demonstrated the potential of football in the region, a promise that was partly fulfilled when Australia broke through on the world stage. However, Australia's quest for even higher level competition eventually led to a monumental shift. In 2006, Australia left the OFC to join the Asian Football Confederation. The primary motivation behind this move was the pursuit of a more competitive environment, improved financial opportunities, and enhanced infrastructure that the AFC offered. The transition was a double-edged sword for Oceania. While it opened the door for New Zealand to assume a dominant role in the region, it also exposed the underlying challenges faced by other nations in terms of resources, competitive depth, and development. The departure of Australia reshaped the competitive landscape within the OFC. With Australia now competing in the AFC, New Zealand emerged as the new powerhouse in the region. Nevertheless, the void left by Australia highlighted the disparity in competition levels and the difficulties smaller nations faced in reaching and sustaining international success. Despite these hurdles, the OFC continued to receive support from FIFA, both in terms of increased funding and developmental programs aimed at bolstering infrastructure, coaching, and talent identification across the Pacific. Throughout this period, FIFA's involvement was critical. The organisation not only provided financial backing, but it also implemented strategic initiatives to integrate Oceanian teams into the global football framework. These efforts, however, could only partially bridge the gap created by geographic isolation and limited competitive exposure. As Oceanian teams continued to vie for international recognition, the promise of a more integrated and competitive structure became increasingly apparent. The shift in dynamics post-2006, driven by Australia's departure, underscored the urgent need for more sustainable domestic and international platforms, efforts that would eventually culminate in the announcement of the groundbreaking initiative like the OFC Professional League. In Oceania, club football development has long been hampered by the region's vast geographical isolation and limited resources. This challenge is perhaps most evident in the organisation and competitiveness of the OFC Champions League, which has historically mirrored the uneven development across the region. In its early years, the OFC Champions League was dominated by Australian clubs. The first 4 editions were won exclusively by teams from Australia. The early success underscored the advanced state of football infrastructure and professional organisation in Australia compared to other nations in the region. However, after Australia's departure from the OFC in 2006, New Zealand clubs began to take centre stage. New Zealand not only stepped up as a regional powerhouse, but also established a strong domestic foundation that allowed them to dominate the competition in subsequent years. Beyond these 2 nations, only 2 clubs from other Oceanian countries have ever claimed the title, highlighting the persistent disparities in resources and development. A significant milestone for Oceanian club football on the global stage came via the FIFA Club World Cup. Auckland City FC, one of New Zealand's most successful clubs, famously finished 3rd in the competition, a result that not only elevated the club's profile, but also demonstrated the potential of teams when exposed to higher levels of competition. Participation in the Club World Cup has had a profound impact, offering invaluable experience, exposure to international styles of play, and the motivation to invest further in player development. With anticipated changes to the tournament's format in the future, the benefits for clubs from the region could be even more significant. Despite these bright spots, the overall landscape for club football in Oceania remains challenging. Nearly all clubs in the region operate on an amateur or semi-professional basis. In New Zealand, only 2 clubs have reached full professionalism by competing in the A-League, an arrangement that underscores the rarity of professional environment in the region. This lack of professional status across most domestic leagues has contributed to difficulties in retaining local talent and competing consistently on the international stage. In response to these ongoing challenges, plans for the OFC Professional League have been set in motion. Announced as a long-term initiative to be launched in 2026, the new league represents a strategic effort to transform the region's club football landscape. FIFA has played an instrumental role in this initiative, not only through direct funding, but also by providing technical expertise and strategic oversight. The Federation's involvement is expected to ensure that clubs meet certain financial and operational benchmarks. Preliminary guidelines suggest that clubs may need to raise considerable amounts of capital to meet professional standards. This funding requirement could pose a significant challenge, especially for clubs based on smaller islands where resources are already scarce. The new OFC Professional League is set to include 8 teams, with early indications hinting at the potential participation of clubs from Australia and even Hawaii. However, whether these teams will be existing clubs stepping up to a new competition or newly formed entities remains to be seen. Nonetheless, the introduction of this league is expected to have a ripple effect. While domestic leagues and the traditional OFC Champions League will continue to operate, the new professional league is aimed at elevating the overall standard of play. It will create a more stable, competitive environment that encourages long-term investment in club infrastructure and talent development. The announcement of the OFC Professional League, scheduled to launch in 2026, represents a transformative moment for club football in Oceania. The new 8-team competition is designed to address long-standing structural challenges and elevate the region's profile on the global stage by offering regular, high-quality competition. A key element of this initiative is the significant role played by FIFA. The international governing body has not only been instrumental in initiating the league, but is also actively involved in its funding and technical oversight. FIFA's support aims to ensure that the league meets professional standards from its inception. While specific figures are still under discussion, preliminary guidelines suggest that clubs may be required to raise substantial capital. Estimates indicate that clubs might need to secure anywhere from several $100,000 to over $1 million each to cover operational costs, facility upgrades, and other professionalization measures. The league's team composition has generated considerable interest. Early discussions have hinted at the possibility of including clubs from outside the traditional OFC footprint. So far, evidence on additional teams from other regions is inconclusive, and the primary focus continues to be on strengthening Oceanian clubs. For many clubs, particularly those from smaller island nations, raising the necessary funds could be a formidable challenge. Limited sponsorship opportunities, smaller fan bases, and the inherent financial constraints of operating in remote locations may hinder their ability to meet the league's professional standards. Nevertheless, the introduction of the OFC Professional League is expected to catalyse a broader investment in the sport throughout the region, encouraging stakeholders to enhance infrastructure and financial models at both the club and national levels. It's important to note that the new league will complement rather than replace existing competitions. Domestic leagues will continue to serve as the foundational platform for local talent, and the OFC Champions League will remain the premier tournament for determining regional club supremacy. The OFC Professional League is envisioned as an additional layer in the football pyramid, a step up that offers more regular, competitive play and provides a bridge between local competitions and international tournaments. Overall, the OFC Professional League is poised to reshape the football ecosystem in Oceania. With FIFA's backing and a clear mandate to professionalise club football, the league holds the promise of not only enhancing the standard of play, but also of creating a sustainable, long-term structure that benefits players, clubs, and national teams alike. This video is sponsored by Soccer Atos. Are you looking for high-quality football jerseys to show your support for your favourite team? Then check out Soccer Atos, where you'll find a wide selection of quality jerseys from club and national teams all around the world. Get $5 cash coupon by clicking the link in the description to sign up. And don't forget to use code PITCH at checkout for 10% off your order.